walking around with these shirts for Simplicity Radio. You haven't been touched until you've been touched by this angel, Tamanika Turner, 615-877-5969 to order your shirt for Simplicity Radio broadcast.
Hello everybody, this is Coach Scott Oatsfall with LT360, and we are proud sponsors of Simplicity Radio with Angela Bingham. LT360 is an all-natural healthcare company specializing in getting people healthy at the cellular level while nurturing the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. We're an all-natural healthcare, so if you struggle with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, or you're looking to get off your medication and change your life, then you can give us a call at 615-815-0390 or lt360.com. And again, you're listening to Simplicity Radio with my sister, woman of power and faith, Angela Bingham.
This is Michelle Gibson with United Realty Group in South Florida, where I listen to and support Simplicity Radio with Angela Bingham. If you are looking to buy or sell real estate in the South Florida area, don't forget to contact me at 561-336-6119 or Michelle with 2 L's at the number 4 salepbc.com. You are listening to Simplicity Radio with Angela Bingham on WGNS 1450 on your dial. Stay tuned for more stimulating conversation.
It's not just your home or car. I'm State Farm Agent Emerson Williams. We see your home and car as the time and memories that you put into it. Give me a call at 615-459-2683 and let me help you give them the protection they deserve.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Simplicity. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Angie B., along with my co-host,
Angie Renee and Taylor.
And we're so glad to have you with us. If no one has told you today, we will. God loves you, and so do we.
Yeah.
You are special to us, and we thank God for this month of September. It seems like it came in fast, and it's just flying by.
Absolutely.
So, every day, just tell somebody that you love them. Make every day count. Simplify your own life. And yes, you can do it one day at a time. And sometimes it takes 1 second at a time. But don't judge yourself. Just love on yourself.
That's right.
And then God will give you the perfect peace to get it all done.
Yes.
Well, thank you for streaming with us in FM 101.9, AM 1450, and FM 100.5. If you want to live stream with us on wgnsradio.com, scroll on down, and Simplicity will be there on the air waiting on you. And most of you are streaming us on youtube.com/@ News Radio WGNS. We love you. And when you're on the YouTube, listen now and listen later. And then share and like us at the same time. And we are so grateful that once you realize what simplicity means, that you have purpose, and God is God-given. And when you're walking in your purpose, there is nothing that can stop you. Absolutely nothing. And then when you're in your purpose, God gives you power to do, and he empowers you to do it, and you will see it through. And then after your purpose, your power, and with your purpose, your power, that's the whole plan of God. The day you were born, before you were born, God had a plan for you. Just follow his blueprint for the rest of your life. Then he will give you passion to do all of it. And you'll have so much fun, and and make it look easy. And people will say, how did you do that? And you said, nothing but the grace of God. It's all in the
Thank
gift.
you, Lord.
And then we just want you to know that with the purpose, power, and passion and the plan, God will give you supernatural peace.
Yeah.
And that's peace that passes all understanding when your mind is stayed on
Him.
Jesus Christ. And so you got to put your mind on him. Because see, people will do something to make your mind go across town, and then you want to lay down your religion, you understand? So we don't want you to do that. We want you to keep it perfect at all times in the God kind of peace. Well, we want to thank everybody for coming. We have a dynamic show topic for you. We have a dynamic, awesome person. I mean, just he just exudes knowledge and wisdom and intelligence and God has gifted him to be able, because some people can have wisdom and knowledge, but they do not have the wherewithal to make it plain and simplify for others to understand it. Well, get paper and pen, ladies and gentlemen, because this is what you're going to get tonight. And Taylor is going to tell us how you can stay in tune and in contact with Simplicity.
Yes, you can follow us on all social medias. First, follow us on Facebook, Simplicity Sunday on WGNS. Instagram and TikTok at Simplicity Radio. You can also call or text at 615-893-1450. Again, that number is 615-893-1450. And if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can email us at teamsimplicityradio@yahoo.com. Also, we are now on all streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, iHeart, and Amazon Music. And you can just search Simplicity Sunday.
All right.
Yeah. So I feel like singing that song, Moving On Up, Moving On Up.
Got a little bit of everything for everybody.
Yes, we do. But we're just so grateful to Taylor, and I'm so grateful to Angie Renee. And just for being a part of Team Simplicity. God has greater things for us.
Yes,
and I
thank
do
you,
believe
Lord.
that we're a voice for the nation.
Yes, ma'am.
And we want to thank our producer. She does everything in a spirit of excellence. And we have missed you and welcome back, from the races. When you get that race car, just let me drive in it, okay? No, let me ride. You can drive.
Ride. That's right.
Well, Angie Renee, take it away.
All right. Well, first, before we get started, we want to send our love to Missy D.
Yes.
And Taylor has, she has a very poignant statement that she wants to make concerning Missy D. So
yes,
Taylor?
I'll take it away. Missy D, we just want you to know that we love you. Have a little thing that we just want to share with you and everyone that you are in contact with and may love and support. We just want to say, with every great story, when one chapter ends, another one begins. And after a year with Team Simplicity, Missy D has closed that chapter and is preparing for her next one. We wish you the very best, and may the Lord continue to bless you on your journey, lead you in all of your future endeavors, and elevate you with a boldness and a love. We thank you for your time, your heart, and your voice here at Simplicity, and we love you forever.
Yes, we love you, Missy D, and we will miss you. God bless you.
Amen. And it may be gone, but never forgotten.
That's right.
We thank God for the precious memories. Amen.
All right. Our show tonight is part of our Social Justice Sunday series, and it's entitled Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Why It Still Matters. And tonight's guest is no stranger to the Simplicity Desk. He is none other than Dr. Aaron Treadwell. History professor.
Oh, sorry about that.
Round
That's
of
okay.
applause.
We're excited. History professor at the Middle Tennessee State University. All right. Welcome, Dr. Treadwell, back to the Simplicity Desk.
Back to
Woo! Yeah. We
He's
don't
a
even.
friend. He's a friend
Yes,
of
he
Simplicity.
is. Absolutely. We're excited to have you back just to have this conversation. We knew you would be perfect for it. You are so, like Angie B said, you're so knowledgeable, and the way you present information, it helps for people who don't quite understand. You can tell you're a teacher at heart, because
Right.
the way you break down the information, a person can leave having full understanding of what it is that we discuss. So
Sure.
We just
and
got
Angie Renee, let me jump in. Not only a teacher at heart, but he has several gifts.
He's
a teacher
pastor,
and a
yeah.
pastor, a preacher. Come
teacher.
on.
Once again, yeah.
Go on and exercise
Yes,
the
he
gifts.
is.
Yes,
Come
ma'am.
on.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Give a shout out to your church as
Yes,
well.
yes.
Absolutely. Just want to give a shout out to Key Memorial United Methodist Church and New Webb Grove AME Church. And so I thank all of those who are watching. Also, I'm the Director of Africana Studies at MTSU. So some of my students who did not have a choice but chose to be on with us as well. Welcome to y'all. Ashe, good to have you here.
Awesome.
I just want to start the show tonight with a scripture, Proverbs 21:2-3. A person may think their own ways are right, but the Lord weighs the heart. To do what is right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. So leading into a conversation on DEI, which is systemic discrimination includes patterns of behavior, policies, or practices that are part of the structures of an organization, and they create or perpetuate disadvantage. Diversity, equity, and inclusion was incorporated to help minimize some of the effects of some of the discrimination that has been so historic in history. And so that is why we're having this conversation tonight.
Yes.
So, Dr. Treadwell, what are your thoughts on statements that indicate DEI is the reason a position is achieved, as opposed to acknowledging that a person actually has the qualifications and credentials to have that position?
Sure. I mean, I think some of this stems from ignorance to frustrations. DEI, or diversity, equity, inclusion, is a regulatory process, meaning that there is an institution, in this case, a government, mandating particular practices, including but not limited to hiring, from conduct to even the persona or the published image, right? So this goes from the NFL requiring particular individuals to reflect a diverse background to commercials, so on and so forth. And so the reality is we live in a nation, and I don't want to do long form radio, but I do think to just add some context, we live in a nation that, although is young, has systemic ideological principles that are embedded so deep into our foundation. There's a reason why when someone may stand up against a particular measure that's oppressive, individuals use particular statements as a saying, you don't love your country, right? So the reality is, if you can go all the way back, we're talking 400 years of systematic learning, right? When we talk about the word ideology, the root word study of, right? So ideology means the study of how people think, right? And how do you think? You think from what you perceive, what you take in, what you see, what you hear, what you taste, what you feel, right? And those particular experiences from 400 years, we'll use the example. I know we're talking about diversity. Diversity includes all different races and cultures and creeds and genders outside of the main meta narrative. But the reality is, for 400 years, you have an example of African American people at the hands of some kind of disability or oppression, from slavery to Jim Crow, right? To different actions. And so when you see these things and you hear these things, I'll use an example because I have children. The first time something happens, right, you watch and you observe.
Yes.
And then when it happens over and over and over again, it becomes to be desensitized in you. It becomes a normal practice. You see an individual for 5, 10, 100, 200, 300 years in enslavement, you begin to create a cognitive connection to race being a factor in one's caste or one's class or one's place on this earth. I.e., if you see an individual who's poor, you see an individual who is uneducated, you see an individual in a particular space that you may deem violent or unappreciative, and for the most part, that individual is identified with a particular culture and or race, in this case an African American, you begin to build these presuppositions that to be black means that you deserve this particular status, you deserve this particular case. And so therefore, this is what deep is about it. The reality is that becomes how you think and or perceive that individual. So it's not necessarily a one-off thing where an individual is practicing bigotry or an individual is practicing prejudice. That's a self-perceived act. Ideology is a cultural system that has been embedded within the atmosphere in which you live in. And so the ideology of America in this case, right, is a particular country, a particular nation that has functioned and operated to observe in normalcy a particular individual or particular culture or race, in this case African Americans, deemed in this space of oppression, right? And so it becomes, in a sense, normal to see a black person and assume they're lesser than, to assume their wealth, to assume their education level. And this goes into the hiring practices. To kind of fast forward, I don't want to take up all the time with one question, so forgive me if I'm kind of going
the context
fast.
is good.
But the reality then is when you go into hiring practices, the goal in a vacuum would be meritocracy. That means that your work is in front of a hiring individual. They assess your background, and based off of the person who's best fit for the role, that individual gets the job. That's the ideal situation. The problem is we know that there are feelings, that there are cultural dynamics, that there are sensitivities that people have when they hire, when they put together teams. I don't know about you, but most of my friends look like me. Most of my friends came from places where I'm from. They like the things that I like. They listen to the music that I listen to, right? We even have the same jive, the same conversation. And the reality is when we get around people who may not look like us or talk like us or hang where we hang, the reality is you have to kind of have that space of discernment. You have to kind of figure out, well, like, okay, how can I say something that may not offend you? Or how can I say something that you'll understand and that you'll be a part of?
Yep.
This is universal, right? So these same concepts take place in the workforce.
You're right.
So you hire an individual, your natural inkling is to hire someone who you feel comfortable around, someone who may understand your lingo, your conversation, may understand your even dietary practices and or traditions, someone who does not make you feel uncomfortable when you talk about religion or you talk about holidays and you don't want to step on someone's pronouns. So we as human beings are often comfortable hiring individuals in whom reflect our identity. And so that's where DEI comes in, because ultimately what has happened historically is that individuals have been uncomfortable and unwilling to move to stick in a space of meritocracy, and instead have hired individuals whom they rather be comfortable with versus being in a space where they could be successful in. And so DEI requires individuals to look beyond their comfort level, their comfort spaces, and recognize that there is talent that does not look like them, that does not sound like them, that does not dress and or act like them.
Absolutely.
DEI is simply
like it.
requesting and forcing an institution, a job, so on and so forth. Hire the best. Don't hire who's the most comfortable.
Yes.
Hire the best. And
Now you need to say that so slow.
Because that was not a mouthful.
Wow.
Hire the best. Oh my goodness.
Just say that again.
Sure. And
Oh my God, that is a book.
and let me tell you this. My wife should be on the show. One thing, I love macaroni.
J-Trip.
And cheese. Do you like cheese?
Well, of course it is. It gotta have some cheese on it, and it has to have butter in here. It has to be baked. Don't boil me.
Crispy top.
No macaroni and cheese. I need it baked.
Yeah. Casserole style.
And I love macaroni. And when it comes to Thanksgiving and it comes to Christmas and it comes to holidays, macaroni is the first thing I put on my plate.
Yes.
But the reality is, I can't sit down with just macaroni in my plate, because that's not the full entree. That doesn't provide all. In fact, let me put you on game if you don't know. There's nothing better when you put the. I'm a collard green man. You put the collard greens with the sweet potatoes.
Come on
now. The macaroni and the turkey. But here's this. In the middle, the juice all hits in the middle. Lord have mercy.
Don't play.
And that's where you dip the roll. You don't dip the roll on the side. You dip it in the middle. and that's where the harmony comes in.
My gosh.
So what I'm saying
That's a
is
meal.
the reality is to just have a plate of macaroni.
Come on now.
Robs
Paint
you
it.
of the full essence
Yes.
of creativity.
Yes,
It
yes.
robs you of the
My.
blessing and opportunity for not only intellectual inquiry, but to think outside the box. It can allow you to grow not only in your decision making and planning. You gotta be well rounded, and so that's what
Yes.
DEI
Absolutely.
mandates. That ultimately
Yes.
you could better serve a country. We as Americans, I consider myself American.
That's right,
Right.
we do.
We as Americans are a diverse nation, and so if our industries, if our leadership does not reflect our population, ultimately we have institutions full of macaroni, right? Without the
Wow.
diverse components that are needed for the true ability to thrive and to grow. So that's kind of a quick but long response to that question.
But the way you touched so many points, but then you were intellectual, then you were able to paint a picture of
Visual.
what it is to be diverse. Because who wants a plate of just macaroni? You need all of the different workings
right.
and fixings to come together to make one cohesive plate,
That's right.
in a sense. And that
And
is
it all tastes
And
good.
it's I was about to say,
and
and
it
it's
all
good.
one thing complements each other, and it all goes
Right.
together, and it
Yes,
tastes and
yes.
it comes together and make
Absolutely.
one.
Absolutely.
That was beautiful.
We are already on fire. Y'all better get your pens and your papers. Share. We want to listen. Everybody you know needs to be watching the show tonight. All right, or listening. If you can't get to the YouTube, be listening, because this is gonna get deeper and it's gonna get better. All right. So, I was going to say, what do you think? Why do you think diversity, equity, and inclusion has come under attack with Project 2025?
I think DEI, or diversity, equality, and inclusion, is just overall part of attack on regulation that has been as old as this ground has had an American flag on it. The reality is regulation, going all the way back to our founding fathers, has always been at the crux of the conversation concerning what role does the government have over its citizens. Even going back, we know that this particular state has an affinity for Civil War history, being that we have Stones River and the historical walk with Trail of Tears that goes right through it, just right up the street. But the reality is, we know that the much of the Civil War was fought over states' rights or states' regulation, in a sense, over the control of slavery, right? The ability for states to dictate their willingness and or unwillingness to abide by federal regulation.
Yes.
And so DEI is just one of many particular battles that are within Project 2025, where individuals at this point do not want the federal government telling them who they hire, how they hire, and how they conduct their employees once they're hired. We know that DEI does require a few components, and in fact, if I can just kind of briefly give some history, we see DEI beginning to be thrown around by John F. Kennedy in 1961 and eventually passed in 1965 by President Johnson. As part of an order, and this is the quote because I want to read it: take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and that employees are treated during employment without regard to race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Nowhere in there does it say preferential treatment. Nowhere in there does it say skip through the door or get in without qualifications. It simply says give them a shot. But the reality is, let's think about this. At some point or another, if you're giving the entire population a fair shot, what is happening, regulation is meaning that sometimes the buddy hires won't be able to pass through anymore, that the privileges and the opportunities will no longer work anymore. And so those particular situations can be frustrating to someone who may feel like if it's their business, if it's their particular school, if it's their particular institution, that they don't want to be told how they conduct it. Now, at some point or another, if I pay taxes, it ain't yours, it's the states. And if it's the states, it's the federal governments. But nevertheless, these are some of the mindsets that lost cause ideology, or these sentiments that we can control our state, you can't tell us what to do, have always existed. And this is just one of the many fights.
I like that history. And some of us think that it just happened with George Floyd.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, and
Say it.
and when you were talking about the history of it and the history of Civil War and the question of Project 2025, could you give some tidbits of information to our audience that may not know anything about Project 2025?
Sure. So I could do what I can. So when we talk specifically about Project 2025, right, there has been debate on both sides whether or not it is affiliated with a presidential candidate and the overall organization of it. What it can be said is that it is, in a sense, a manifesto response to quote unquote taking back America, or putting back into effect what some may call conservative ideas and practices, including but not limited to vouchers for students, to defund, as I say, public education, the changing of health insurance, the changing processes in terms of what state monies and federal monies are able to provide, the ending of programs like affirmative action, diversity, equity, and inclusion, just overall processes that go back, as I said, to strip individuals, even those qualified, of the opportunity simply because they do not fit in the particular narrative, they do not fit in the particular look, they are not assimilated, i.e. they have not got rid of their cultural ties and identities that may not only be American but tied to the diaspora. And so it is, in a sense, a force to push in more radicalized views in the conservative space within American government and politics.
Yes. That was awesome. In a nutshell, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And I would like to encourage our audience to research and see and be abreast, have knowledge, and have the awareness of what we are voting, the process of why you need to vote, and take privilege to go vote. Let's not just talk about these things, but actually get out and vote. This is a very important voting year, and we need to be there casting ballots.
And I just reiterate, my mother is the director of Head Start in North Florida, Leon County area, and some of the other surrounding counties. And I could tell you legally, I can't tell you the numbers because I don't know them, right? Because it's not my job. But I could just tell you from following my mother. My mother's classrooms across North Florida represent the entire rainbow of culture in America, from not just, of course, different races with different cultures, but also people from different backgrounds and traditions.
Yes.
But what I can tell you is this: the one thing they all have in partnership is their class, their wealth. These are poor people, and whether they're white poor people or black poor people or Hispanic poor people or Asian poor people, all people in between, poor people are being greatly impacted as well by Project 2025. And I would tell you, if you look at the statistics, Tennessee is one of the poorest states in the union. And so the reality is, as poverty goes, so does oppression. And I just warn individuals again, this is not a obviously I identify culturally as an African American man, but this is an attack on poverty. And the reality is, regardless of your race, sometimes the rhetoric sounds nice, but the reality is, if you don't fall in the income bracket, sometimes the shoe will be on the other foot, and it will put it will put you down in a very adverse place. So I would definitely say, especially persons, not just persons who are poor, but persons who have a heart for those in need.
Yes.
Please discern the impact of Project 2025. It's definitely an important situation to take note of.
I think that's very important what you said about you may not be poor, but this could still affect you, especially if you're on the borderline.
Yeah.
And right when you think it doesn't affect you, something coming into place, being implemented, and then all of a sudden you're complaining when you had an opportunity to do something about it before it was actually implemented. A lot of people don't even read it. They just, oh, it's this kind of view or this kind of perspective. I'm for it, and they don't even know what they're going into.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we all, especially as a Christian faith, and I consider myself a Christian, of course. I'm a pastor, but and I know that we're all for not necessarily prosperity gospel, but we all have hope and faith and prayer that through hard work that God will give us that big time job, that big time house, and that big time car. But the reality is, God never promised that in the Word. And I know this isn't a theological radio show, so I'm not going to go too deep into that. But the reality is, the economy is changing. And so even right now, if you are a millennial myself or you're Generation Z or even an Alpha and you're just listening to the radio show at the age of 6 or 5 or something like that, the reality is the economy is changing so fast.
Yes.
Student loans are becoming so predatory. Even if you are middle class right now, some people are just simply a paycheck away.
Yes.
A paycheck away from no longer being in that space, and those protections that you think you have may no longer exist. So I would second that and think that's a very strong point to make.
Wow.
So let's discuss the difference between personal stereotypes and systemic discrimination.
Sure. Okay. I hope I want to go on break, so I got to make a mental note on time. So, you said a personal stereotype and systemic discrimination, and where I would start with that is the idea of the difference between, for example, we loosely use the term like racism, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, so and so's racist. This is a particular class I taught, and one of the things we do is we talk. Instead of just using generic terms, we define what race is. We said that before. It's an ideological construct. So race isn't necessarily a personal act. Or racism, in a sense, is a worldview, a system in which we operate in. So the reality is racism is embedded within the ideology of this country. So it knows no bounds. Racism can be adopted by persons, not just white, but persons who are black, Asian, and everyone in between. It's the perspective that the ideological or the concepts or constructs of this nation are built on. And so that's that, right? That's out in the atmosphere. I always say in class, that's the oxygen.
Yes.
So at some point or another, like, you can't avoid the oxygen, but you need to learn how to maneuver within it. With that said, prejudice and bigotry and discrimination are sometimes better ways of understanding how we function and operate in that. And so prejudice is an attitude or thought based on stereotypes. And so maybe it's not necessarily something physical, but you've seen it on TV. I heard a conversation happen recently that the majority of Americans actually don't learn about different cultures or different races from traveling or interacting. They learn about television or radio or things like this, right? So, so sometimes, for example, you may be living, my brother lives in Iowa, so shout out to Des Moines, Iowa. You may be living in Des Moines, Iowa, and you've never met a black woman specifically from St. Louis. So what do? You just assume everyone's sexy red, and you just assume that all black women, right, conduct themselves that way because you've never met one. Right. You've never had an Angela Bingham as a teacher, right? You've never had a Dr. Treadwell as a professor. And so at some point or another, these are the perceptions that you have to put together, right? And that's what prejudice is, that based off of the things that you've seen, maybe not experiences, but the things that you've seen or the things that you've heard, you begin to build concepts and ideas of what they should be, right? Whereas then when you have bigotry simply is you take that prejudice and you begin to act on it, right? And so in a sense, and we have this conversation all the time, you can be a bigot of any racial background, right? We have white bigots, we have black bigots, and we have every other culture has bigotry within them. It is, in a sense, you take prejudices and you act on them. That's an individual act.
Yes.
But again, we said racism is bigger than an individual act. It's an ideological concept that's wound into our legal system, that's wound into our economics, that's wound into even some of the religious fundamental practices that exist within this culture. It's wound up in terms of how individuals get loans. It's wound up into how individuals are arrested, and even how individuals in the checkout line are stared at, sometimes more than others, right?
Come on.
These are the ideological systems, but how you act on that is the prejudice and bigotry. Okay, so going into that systematic oppression, in a sense, then systematic oppression is a system that's built on the ideology of a space. And so when you say, and I'm going to try to remember what you said the difference between stereotypes and systematic discrimination. Stereotypes can simply be your own, you take the atmosphere, you take the ideologies there, and then you absorb it, and then you see someone on a particular show, and then you just assume that's your stereotype that you're building, right? Whereas a systematic discrimination is an ideological system that has already been put into play. It has already been indoctrinated by 400 years of information, right? And so at some point or another, I don't know if you remember school, it's one thing the very first semester, the very first class, when you get a grade, right, your GPA kind of can go everywhere, right? That's almost like a stereotype in a sense. It's a one-off. Whereas a systematic discrimination is like that last semester of school. It's your GPA has already, in a sense, been impacted by class. I guess it's 120 credits, right? It's been impacted by 4 years, 5 years, or some of my super seniors, 6 years, right, of information to where at some point or another, it's already kind of grounded. It's kind of already set up. And the reality is, it's easier to impact and attack a stereotype. But it just like it's hard to change a GPA once you've been in school for 6 years, it is. Think of that. I don't know the math. I'm not a mathematician. I'm a historian. But you do the math. Whatever, 6 or 400. When we talk about ultimately 1619 and even in the 1500s, you go back to 1619 and you do that math. What are we talking about? 405 years or something like that, right? 405 years times the 4 years of school. Now we're talking about 100 times that. That's the difficulty of systematic oppression and changing it. And so the reality is there are core tenets that need to be changed. Right? There's core tenets. Kneeling because of police brutality and saying that your kneeling is un-American is a core tenet. So it's complicated and it's difficult. And the purpose of DEI is to mandate the conversations we're having now in police and fire departments, in Fortune 500 companies, in universities, and the same, that all individuals have the opportunity to at least be cognizant and begin approaching those particular stereotypes. Systematic oppression, if it took 400 years to build, it's not going to collapse in two.
Come on.
We saw more hell in this country post Barack Hussein Obama, right, than you did. Well, we'll just leave it there. So the reality is, I often say, you don't build the wall, right, unless you have Barack Hussein Obama. And the reality is, you don't have the January 6th resurrection on the Capitol stairs, right, if you don't have Barack Hussein Obama's push towards inclusivity, right, and some of these social changes. And so the reality is, when you begin to attack stereotypes, and I also say this as well, stereotypes are they are created and established to make people feel comfortable. I don't know about you, but as human beings, we all have a natural inclination to create safety barriers, right? This is like psychology, y'all. Like, the reality is, all of us, like even every human animal, but especially human beings, we have created safety mechanisms, right, to allow us to be prepared and feel comfortable where we're going. That's why if we see someone who makes us feel comfortable, we naturally let our guard down, let our hair down. I don't have any hair, so I got a guard. That's all I got, right? And we feel comfortable in that space, and we're not as guarded. We don't feel like we're in danger. Whereas when we're in a space that does not necessarily meet the social standards that we're used to, that's when our guard is up. That's when we're skeptical. That's when we do not trust and or believe, right? And so the reality here is that, especially within 400 years of conditioning, individuals are going to have a guard. That's what DEI's intention is, to begin to attack some of these particular stereotypes and some of these particular ideas that have created barriers for progress and opportunity.
Yes. Dr. Treadwell, God bless you. Dr. Treadwell is all I can say. Doctor
is in the building.
Yes, he is. And that is so beautiful. You know, and to the social construct, I do believe that when people know who they are, and like you said, it's the fabric of the 400 years, and when we begin to know who we are, to me, that is the beginning of expressing creativity in a creative way of my own personality. Say, for instance, most of us, when we ask of color, when we ask, who are you? What do? We say a continent and a color. We're the only ones that do that. We say 2 continents. We say African, American,
Sure.
or we'll say black.
Sure.
But who are we? Who is our tribe? Because as I was studying this, and you know, in the Bible, when you want to skip all that genealogy,
Sure.
but it's important.
Yeah.
They list every tribe. They list this. They list that. But then with us,
Sure.
we don't have that.
Yeah, you know, I and this, it could go so many directions. So I'm gonna stay on DEI. But when you have me back, we can
We'll discuss that.
We can talk
Oh, we can
roots
talk
or
about
whatever.
that offline.
Sure. So the reality here is that if you go all the way to the birth of Black studies on campuses, or if you go back to Carter Woodson and W.B. Du Bois, 2 of the early PhDs in American history, and Du Bois was the first from Harvard. And he was ultimately told that there is impossible to write about Black culture, but that's pushed him to write his dissertation on Philadelphia. And then when Carter G. Woodson went to write his PhD, he was told that there was no Black history, and ultimately that's when he became what we now know as the father of Black history, soon Black History Week, and then later Month. And so the reality is that's what DEI's intention is, to allow individuals to be cognizant of not just people existing. One of the most dangerous statements that you can say is, I do not see color. We often joke that the I do not see color is the nuanced version of calling someone color. Like it literally is an attack on an individual. In a sense, it's saying that you don't have to be ashamed of your Blackness, right? Whereas the counter argument is that I see your color and I appreciate your diversity and I appreciate what you bring. I appreciate the diversity in terms of maybe the different perspective that you bring, the different cultural influences that have impacted you, and how you can maybe give me a better. How about this? How many of us have seen commercials or ads and we say, I know there was not a Black person in the room, or I know there was not a woman in the room, or I know there was not a Hispanic in the room, and they let this commercial get out, right? But that's what DEI does. It lets us know that there are different cultures, there are different groups. And as I tell people all the time, my mother's lineage, I was able to trace much further than my father's, although my father's history is very proud. In 1863, my great-grandfather, Peter Blakely, actually escaped from slavery in North Carolina at the age of 14, wound up with the Illinois Infantry as a contraband, and eventually used his monies from the war to build the first Black church in, at that time, the second largest city in the state of Illinois, Rockford. And the church name is Allen Chapel AME. It's still there, historic church. He started the church out of his mother-in-law's house. But with that said, the reality is the culture of the diaspora, and this is kind of putting it full circle. DEI also teaches Black people that they do have culture, and that they do have history, and that they do have tradition. And one thing that I've learned is we truly don't know how grand and historic African American culture is until you leave. It's kind of one of those things where, like, you don't appreciate where you're from until you leave, and then you realize, like, the grass is not greener. And when I tell you, I remember shout out to one of our professors, Ali Alou, in the history department at MTSU. When we went to Senegal with our students for study abroad, and it is interesting how most of them, like all the students, we went over there and we bought all this like Senegalese garb, and we bought all this stuff that, hey, my brother, hey, my sister, they were selling us, and none of them were wearing what we were wearing. they were all wearing influenced urban black gear. They were listening, even though it's a Muslim country and it was during Ramadan. But I remember getting in the taxi, they were listening to Wu-Tang Clan, right, and they were listening to Notorious B.I.G. So even in the quote-unquote motherland, right, African American culture is revered, right? African American hairstyles, African American clothing, African American dances. And so the reality is, it's easy to negate our influence. Is easy to negate the relevance, but the reality is, I always tell people, I know somewhere there is a lineage that points to the exact location, longitude, and latitude of where my ancestry came from. But also, I am a child of Grenada, Mississippi, tenant farmers, sharecroppers, and cotton pickers. I'm a ancestry of Peter Blakely of a tobacco plantation who worked in the house, right, who went through hell, but through high water and through Jesus, right, he was able to navigate. And so, like, I'm part of that culture as well. And I think instead of just looking to a continent, I also have my continent here. I have my culture here. And I'll finish this. There's a particular saying of an article titled Hyphenation Nation, and it identifies the uniqueness of blackness, because the reality is, if you think about it, if you see a person often who has European ancestry, usually at this point they've identified themselves as white, but we are one of the few racial groups, right, within America that still has a hyphen in our identification. If you think about that, right?
Absolutely.
Nevertheless, you see persons of this particular hue, right? They're identified not necessarily as just Americans, but they're identified as African Americans. And I know that some people may feel a certain way, but at some point or another, like taking back, I thought I said roots, but taking and claiming that particular tradition, there's proud history, there's proud culture, there's proud traditions. And I think just having the ability, you may not be able to go back to sub-Saharan West Africa, but you can go back at your family and look at things that they've overcome. You can go to your local churches, your local Masonic halls, your local Pan-Hellenic Black Greek letter organizations, and look at some of these things. Those are most countries, the different styles, the different traditions, the different celebrity. African American history has so much influence in those spaces, and it's definitely proud history. We're not in February, but every day is Black History.
That's
so
right.
If I can make that shameless plug.
Yeah, that's right.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So many times, we've been referred to as Negro, Black, African American, just a human being. How about that?
Sure.
Just a part of the American race. And go ahead, Andrew Renee. Dr. Treadwell, you will definitely come back, and we will pinpoint those times in our calendar for the greater of the good of America.
That's right. Yeah. You are listening to Simplicity Radio with your host,
Angie B.
and your co-host, Angie Renee and
Taylor.
Want to sow a seed into Simplicity Radio so that we can continue to do greater things through this ministry? Send your gifts through Cash App at $Simplicity with Angie. That's ANGIE. Again, it's $Simplicity with Angie. Or you can email us at teamsimplicityradio@yahoo.com for more information. Love Connection Ministries. Each and every Tuesday evening at 5 o'clock p.m., join the Love Connection Ministries on Main Street as they sow seeds of love, compassion, and a hot meal to those in need, according to Matthew 25. Email teamsimplicityradio@yahoo.com for contact and donation information. Journal Junkies. Yay! Team Simplicity Radio is pleased to announce the start of our Journal Junkies Club. Journal Junkies will be a gathering where we will come together to heal from those things we do not talk about through writing. Our first gathering will be held on Saturday, October 19th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. at the 615 District Restaurant right here in Murfreesboro. Grab your favorite journal, your favorite pen, and join us for fun, fellowship, and restoration. About next week's show. Join Team Simplicity next Sunday for a Simplicity chat on Talk Topic Revisit Your Dreams, with special guest, Mr. Johnny King. We will see you then for that conversation. Now back to tonight's Simplicity Sunday topic, DEI, Why It Still Matters, with Dr. Aaron Treadwell. All right. I have enjoyed this evening. This has been powerful.
Yes, impactful as well.
Oh my goodness. Hugely impactful. This info, and we knew it was. We knew how you were going to bring it. So that's why we told
He got
everybody.
notes. He has
Oh my goodness,
bullet
he's
points.
ready. He is definitely a professor. Okay, so everyone wants and deserves a piece of the American dream, especially when it was built on the backs of our ancestors. Considering we will not receive reparations for the past, why do you think it is a problem to have DEI in place when its sole purpose was to help level the playing field?
Sure. I think at some point or another, I want to take a popular saying, believe who they are the first time they show you.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think at some point or another, you can only operate and function in the world as it is. I know that there are those ideal nirvana states and spaces in a vacuum where you hope that we've transcended and moved beyond. And then January 6th happens and you think you've moved and beyond. And then there's individuals of public position in office using racial epithets towards individuals because they fall in a different background that you think you've moved and you've gone beyond. And then I walk on my own campus and see swastikas and other graphic and negative things. And so at some point or another, the reality is the ultimate goal of DEI is to enhance individuals, not just in terms of their business and hiring practices and just the overall couth and ethics of the space, but also to enhance their ability to grow and to glow. But the reality is we're I guess from 65 to 24, going to 25. I mean, we are almost 60 years. And the progress has been made. That's not to say there's been no progress, but the reality is the end all be all has not been attained. It hasn't been reached. And so the reality is I would simply, in fact, kind of challenge and change that particular statement and simply say that DEI is a continued blessing, and I thought about this in my head, asking what would be one's retort if called a DEI hiree. My response would be, "You're welcome." Right? that you are welcome. That I'm enhancing the footprint of this business. You're welcome that I'm providing more enlightenment to your conversations that have been stale and have not thought out the box. You're welcome that I'm providing you avenues, that I'm providing you recruitment and a particular image that you have not been able to go into. You're welcome that I'm providing you an opportunity to break down particular doors and or ceilings that have been constructed when in reality this place needs some light. Amen.
Come on,
so the reality is DEI is a good thing because simply put, it's hard to have faith in a system that has not worked in the ideal manner. And will DEI exist forever? That I don't know. I can't necessarily prophetically say yes or no, but what I can ask and say is that DEI, I've seen for myself, provide opportunities for spaces to grow, for more students to attain education that previously had not, for leadership to go into communities that had been overlooked, and overall for programs to grow in ways that they never would have imagined. And I don't know about you, but when you say going back, and I think about my days, even I was really born in 1986, but I was a 90s baby, and I think about the particular things that we had. I don't want to go back on anything. I want to go in the future, and I want to see things advance and grow and glow, and that's the goal of DEI. That's the goal of it all.
Quick question before we wrap up. What would you say to people that may have been hired as a DEI, but necessarily once they get in the position, they feel as if it's not their place to teach other people how to be around us?
Sure. I mean, it's exhausting. I will say for the most part, many of my colleagues that I work with at MTSU in the history department are great people, but the reality is based off one's culture, based off of one's gender, based off of one's race, and based off of one's sex. The reality is some persons are able to maybe navigate spaces without having to fight for their race, without having to speak up and say, you know what, I don't think that we should use the caricature of Martin Luther King for Black History Month. That's not necessarily something that MTSU did, but my alumni school did, right? And having to have that conversation and speak on behalf of all black people when you're tired and your baby is crying and simply put, you just want to get off the Zoom. But you have decided and had the discernment that, no, you know what, I have to say something because my ancestors are like, boy, you better say something. The same thing could be said for women. The same thing could be said for persons who may be LGBTQIA+, right? Now, the reality is that sometimes the fight can be exhausting. I'm going to tell you this last thing. I have a shameless plug. I got about 9 months. My book is coming out and published in Louisiana University State Press, called Tongues of Fire, Theological Reflections in the Age of Lynching. And I study lynching for a living. Can I tell you that weighs on my heart?
Yes.
That from a day-to-day basis, I'm reading and writing about historical lynchings. I'm reading about the impact that it had on families and churches. I'm seeing the reverberations of said lynchings some 50, 60 years later in the cities when I go and I visit those particular people and their families. It harps on me. So my heart is heavy, right? My eyes are heavy. And then I go in a meeting and someone says something crazy and I'm just like, I'm already tired. And listen, I'm not Malcolm X every day. Sometimes I go to the meeting and I write in a notebook. I say, I'll hand it in next month. I got to go home because I'm tired. And so to kind of answer your question, I don't know how well I did it, but the reality is it could be very exhausting, and I would tell people not to feel guilty. That sometimes even your fight, it does not have to be the most boisterous and loud. Some people are just simply going to say, listen, I could show you better than I could tell you. I could get down with you. I could go low. I could talk it, but I would rather just work and do in an extremely successful manner to where you have to acknowledge me and you have to keep the door in for the next generation. You need some loud folks, but you also need some folks when the loud folks get in trouble who are still on the table. Amen, somebody. Because I had a friend of mine, she was my graduate advisor, and she told me that during the Civil Rights Movement, when she went to go out and march, they said, no, because you're the only A student in the class. So we need you to stay here when we get arrested so you can still represent for us. And I think that yin and yang of it all is important. You don't have to just play one role to hold on to your card, whether that's your black card or your woman card or your queer card or whatever card you're trying to hold. You can play it. It doesn't have to be a monolith. You can play it as it is set fit in your heart and your mind and your soul.
It's like poetry. The way he just everything just comes to this nice crisp pulp, but it's everything that you needed in the question hit.
Yes,
That
you
was
know what?
perfectly
God
put.
bless
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you for tuning in.
Yes,
We hate to come to this part when we have to say we are not out of talk, but we are out of time. We want to thank you, Dr. Treadwell,
Yes, thank you.
for just
Awesome.
illuminating DEI and going even beyond that. And I just want to tell people, when you love God, DEI, it takes another perspective in your mind. It's just treating everybody with equity.
That's right.
That's the
That's
main
right.
thing that we want. We want equity in every area of
right.
life.
That's right.
And when you have God in your life, he illuminates that type of agape love that transcends barriers of your economics, your creed, your color, whatever. If you have money to do it, good. Open up doors for somebody
That's
else.
right.
We are our brother's keeper.
That's
our brother,
right.
sister is not too heavy to lift. So, but just really quick tips to prepare for the election. First of all, register.
Please.
On time enough. And if you have had a name change or, before you're going there, make sure you check on that and register to vote. If you have moved, re-register to vote. If you have if you're a college student and you're out of the country, out of the state, and prepare for that. Re-register and for the country or state that you are in, that you reside in. Take care of all the registration tasks weeks before the election. and not days. Be the game changer. Start
Yes,
ahead
yes.
of time. And the last little tip here, just be prepared and don't let anyone tell you that your vote doesn't matter. It counts.
Yes.
Quick plug. Conversations with candidates. If there are more questions you have, it's hosted at my church, New Web Grove AME Church, 3996 Barfield Crescent Road, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, from 4 to 6 p.m. on Saturday. 4 to 6 p.m. on Saturday the 28th. Thank you.
Saturday 28th. All right. God bless you. We'll see you there.
Good night. We
Good
love
night.
you.
God bless.
This is Pastor James M. McCarroll Jr. welcoming you to the First Baptist